Picture the year 1941. Nazi Germany is swallowing Europe. American factories are still churning out shiny new cars for a peacetime public. Then Pearl Harbor changes everything. In Detroit, Michigan, the auto giants, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, receive a single command from Washington: stop building cars, convert your plants overnight. President Franklin Roosevelt calls Detroit the arsenal of democracy. Within months, assembly lines that once produced passenger sedans are spitting out tanks, bombers, jeeps, and machine guns at a pace the world has never seen. One plant alone rolls out a B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. Michigan doesn't just build cars, it builds the weapons that win World War II and reshapes the modern world. But how did a remote wilderness of forests and lakes become the beating heart of America's industrial empire? This is the story of how Michigan built the American auto empire, and how that empire built modern America. Long before the roar of engines, Michigan was a land of silent forests, powerful rivers, and vast inland seas. Native peoples, the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and others, thrived here for centuries, fishing the Great Lakes, hunting in the deep woods, and trading along ancient water routes. The first Europeans arrived in the early 1600s. French explorer Etienne Brulé paddled these waters around 1620. Jesuit missionaries followed, seeking souls among the tribes. In 1668, Father Jacques Marquette helped establish the first permanent European settlement at Sault Ste. Marie. The real prize came in 1701. French officer Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac founded Fort Pontchartrain du Détroit on the narrow strait connecting Lake Erie and Lake Huron. Detroit, meaning the Strait, quickly became the fur trading capital of the upper Great Lakes. French voyageurs, coureurs de bois, and native partners moved beaver pelts, copper, and stories across the waters. The British seized control after the French and Indian War in 1763, only to face Pontiac's rebellion, a powerful native uprising that nearly drove them out. After the American Revolution, Michigan passed to the United States as part of the Northwest Territory. It remained a rugged frontier. Settlers trickled in slowly, New Englanders and New Yorkers clearing land in the fertile southern Lower Peninsula. The territory's growth accelerated after the War of 1812, when the British threat finally receded. Timber, copper, and iron drew fortune seekers to the Upper Peninsula. Farms spread across the South. Yet Michigan was still wild, sparsely populated, and politically tangled. Statehood arrived in 1837 after a bizarre, almost bloodless conflict known as the Toledo War. Michigan and Ohio quarreled over a narrow strip of land along their border, including the promising port of Toledo. Both sides called out militias, issued fiery proclamations, and exchanged a few shots that wounded one man. Congress finally stepped in. Michigan surrendered the Toledo Strip to Ohio, but gained the western Upper Peninsula in compensation, vast, mineral-rich wilderness that would later prove far more valuable than anyone imagined. On January 26, 1837, Michigan entered the Union as the 26th state. Its future seemed tied to lumber, mining, and agriculture. No one yet dreamed of machines with four wheels. The spark that would ignite Michigan's destiny arrived quietly in the late 19th century. Detroit was already a growing manufacturing hub, producing carriages, stoves, and railroad cars. Then, in the 1890s, a handful of tinkerers began experimenting with horseless carriages powered by noisy internal combustion engines. Ransom Olds, the Dodge brothers, and a young mechanic named Henry Ford were among them. In 1903, Henry Ford incorporated the Ford Motor Company in Detroit with a handful of investors. His vision was radical: build a reliable, affordable car for the average American, not just the wealthy. In 1908, he unveiled the Model T, the Tin Lizzie. It was simple, tough, and cheap. Demand exploded, but building enough cars the old way, skilled craftsmen assembling one vehicle at a time, was too slow and expensive. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 1913, at Ford's Highland Park plant, engineers perfected the moving assembly line. Instead of workers moving to the car moved past the workers on a conveyor. Each man performed one simple task over and over. The time to build a Model T dropped from more than 12 hours to about 90 minutes. Production soared, prices plummeted. By the 1920s, Ford was turning out thousands of cars a day. But Ford didn't stop there. In 1914, he shocked the industrial world by announcing the $5 day, more than double the going wage for factory work. Critics called it crazy. Workers flooded into Detroit from farms, small towns, and overseas. Ford's gamble paid off. Higher wages meant higher productivity and loyal workers who could actually afford to buy the cars they built. The auto industry was no longer a novelty. It was becoming the engine of the American economy. Other pioneers, General Motors under William Durant, Chrysler, Packard, joined the frenzy. Michigan's cities boomed. Detroit transformed from a quiet trading post into the dynamic motor city. The explosive growth brought immense power and deep conflict. The auto plants were brutal places, long hours, dangerous conditions, tyrannical foremen who could fire a man on a whim. Workers grew restless. Early attempts at unionization faced fierce resistance. Detroit was known as one of the most anti-union cities in America. Companies spied on organizers, blacklisted troublemakers, and used police and hired muscle to break strikes. The breaking point came during the Great Depression. In 1936 and 1937, the fledgling United Auto Workers Union launched a daring sit-down strike against General Motors in Flint. Instead of walking out and risking replacement, workers simply sat down inside the plants, refusing to leave and stopping production. For 44 days, they occupied Fisher Body plants while families and supporters rallied outside. Police and company goons tried to evict them with tear gas and clubs. The strikers held firm. Michigan Governor Frank Murphy refused to call in the National Guard to break the strike by force. In February 1937, GM finally recognized the UAW. The victory spread like wildfire. Within months, Chrysler and Ford followed. The UAW became one of the most powerful unions in the country. World War II brought a different kind of power shift. As America mobilized, Michigan's auto plants converted almost overnight. Civilian car production halted. Factories that once built Fords and Chevrolets now produced tanks at the Chrysler Detroit Arsenal, B-24 bombers at Ford's massive Willow Run plant, and countless trucks, jeeps, and aircraft engines. Michigan accounted for nearly a third of the nation's wartime manufacturing output. Women, Rosie the riveters, poured into the plants alongside men too old or unfit for combat. The arsenal of democracy delivered. Michigan didn't just support the war effort, it helped win it. Yet prosperity masked tensions. The massive influx of black workers from the South during the war triggered the deadly 1943 Detroit race riot, exposing deep racial divides in housing, jobs, and daily life. Labor and management continued their uneasy dance after the war, with strikes and tough negotiations becoming routine. Post-war America entered a golden age of abundance, and Michigan sat at its center. The big three, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, dominated. Suburbs sprawled outward from Detroit, filled with families buying new cars, new homes, and new dreams. The interstate highway system, championed by President Eisenhower, fueled even more demand. American cars became symbols of freedom, status, and the good life: tail fins, chrome, powerful V8 engines. Michigan's influence stretched far beyond the assembly line. The state's engineers and designers shaped global automotive standards. Its unions negotiated contracts that set the benchmark for American workers: pensions, health care, paid vacations. The auto industry generated enormous wealth that flowed into schools, roads, and cultural institutions. Detroit's music scene, Motown, captured the rhythm and soul of the city's diverse working class and spread across the world. Politically, Michigan became a swing state whose voters and union muscle could sway national elections. The state's economy diversified somewhat into machinery, chemicals, and tourism in the beautiful Upper Peninsula and Lakeshore regions, but autos remained king. By the 1950s and 1960s, Michigan wasn't just building cars, it was defining the American middle class. Today, Michigan still stands at the heart of the American auto industry, but the empire faces new tests. The state remains a manufacturing powerhouse, home to advanced research, engineering talent, and a vast supply chain. Companies like General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis continue to innovate here. Northwest and Central Michigan have grown with new industries, while the auto sector supports hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions in economic activity. Yet transformation brings turbulence. Foreign competition in the 1970s and 1980s, fuel-efficient Japanese imports, shook the big three, and led to painful layoffs and plant closings. The 2008 financial crisis pushed GM and Chrysler into bankruptcy and government bailouts. Detroit itself filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history in 2013, though the city has since staged a remarkable comeback in downtown revitalization and tech. Now the biggest challenge is the shift to electric vehicles and autonomous technology. Michigan is investing heavily in battery plants, EV production, and research to stay competitive. Southern states and international rivals are aggressively courting suppliers. The transition promises new jobs, but also risks dislocation for workers skilled in traditional manufacturing. Environmental concerns, global supply chains, and changing consumer tastes add layers of complexity. Michigan's natural beauty, its Great Lakes, forests, and dunes, remains a vital economic and recreational asset, reminding residents that the state's identity runs deeper than any single industry. Michigan did not set out to rule the roads of the world. It began as a remote frontier of fur traders and timber barons. Yet through ingenuity, grit, conflict, and sheer industrial muscle, it forged an empire that put America and much of the planet on wheels. The moving assembly line, the $5 day, the arsenal of democracy, the rise of the UAW, all these chapters written in Michigan reshaped not only how cars are built, but how modern economies function and how working people claim a share of prosperity. Today, as the industry hurtles toward electrification and new mobility, Michigan stands once again at a crossroads. The same spirit of innovation that turned a wilderness into the Motor City must now navigate climate realities, global competition, and technological disruption. The story of Michigan and the American auto empire is more than chrome and horsepower. It is a powerful reminder that great nations and great industries are built by ordinary people willing to dream bigger, work harder, and sometimes sit down or stand up when the moment demands it. In the roar of engines past and the quiet hum of electric motors to come, Michigan continues to drive the future forward. The question is whether the empire it built will evolve fast enough to endure.